China has summoned Germany's ambassador in Beijing after Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock called President Xi Jinping a dictator. Baerbock made the remarks in a live interview with Fox News in the U.S. last week when asked about Russia's war on Ukraine. She said, quote, "If Putin were to win this war, what sign would that be for other dictators in the world like Xi, like the Chinese president? So therefore, Ukraine has to win this war." China's foreign ministry condemned Baerbock's comments.
China deplores and firmly rejects the remark by the German side, which is preposterous. It's a serious affront to Chinese political dignity and a blatant political provocation. We've made strong complaints to Germany through diplomatic channels.
DW political correspondent Simon Young is on the story for us. Simon, China is not amused. How is Berlin reacting?
Well, Annalena Baerbock is now in New York for the United Nations General Assembly meeting, and she was asked whether she was aware of the Chinese criticisms of her comments and how she might react. But she simply said, yes, that she was aware of those criticisms. The similar question was put to Chancellor Scholz's spokesman here in Berlin, and he said he didn't want to comment on whether these remarks would in any way affect the relationship between the two countries. So I think this has now gone beyond words, in fact, because, as you mentioned, Patricia Flohr, the German ambassador in Beijing, was summoned and had to listen to those Chinese criticisms in detail on Sunday.
And it's not the official position of the German government to call the Chinese president a dictator, is it?
No, indeed. Germany wants to have good relations with China, which is, after all, its largest trading partner. And just earlier this year, the German government brought out what it called its new China strategy, which I think lays the emphasis on finding ways to sort of bolster the bilateral relationship. It talks about trade and the importance of the relationship. It had some remarks about wanting to promote German values like human rights and democracy, but it also calls China a partner, competitor and systemic rival. So it's not quite the same kind of word. And that strategy paper, I think you could say, was more diplomatic than the foreign minister has been in the last few days.
So with all that in mind, how big a diplomatic crisis is this?
Well, I wouldn't use the word crisis. I think the Chinese have summoned the German ambassador. They've registered their protest. And frankly, I would expect they'd probably leave it at that. It's worth pointing out that the US President Joe Biden did something very similar earlier this year in June on a campaign event. He described President Xi Jinping as a dictator. There were criticisms and protests from the Chinese side, very similar wording, in fact, to what we've heard today. And, well, you know, the relationship between the US and China hasn't been completely blown up. It continues to develop and both sides continue to make their points. So I expect that's what probably will happen here as well.
Simon Young, many thanks.